It's a thing I love about working in London that was entirely part of the DNA at the Shaw Festival. There's a dead seriousness without any preciousness. And I loved that in talking with Tim about directors and design and this and that and all that stuff and the ensemble and everything like that was just a really lovely thing.
Let's get this Shaw on the road. Wherever you are, get in your car and come on down, enjoy a show. If it's your first time, well, jump on in. By the end of this drive, you'll be a Shavian. No, let's get this Shaw on the road.
We have a very special guest.
We sure do. Hey, special guest, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Tim Jennings, and I'm the executive director of the Shaw Festival.
Welcome.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Tim, what is an executive director?
Well, that's a bigger question for a theater company. I've often described my job as figuring out how to find the resources and get the roadblocks out of the way for the artists to make their art. So at the end of the day, I kind of oversee all the systems that do that, like fundraising and marketing. But in a normative sense, that isn't every executive director's role. We all come at this a little differently. Most people in my job come out of marketing or fundraising or business administration. I come out of technical theater, so it's a bit of a different place.
Do you mind touching briefly on a little bit of that and what that journey was for you? How did you find the theater?
I found the theater actually very young. My family brought me to theater all the time. And in fact, started bringing me to the Shaw Festival in 1979. My first production I saw here, I believe, was Blithe Spirit. And then in 1981, I saw the Cyrano de Bergerac here, which was a very famous production. And I just fell in love with it. I thought, I want to do that. I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. So from that point on, it was just mainlining theater. I did that all the time. And I decided, not knowing much back then about arts management, the only job I kind of knew about was stage management. And so I thought, well, I don't really want to be on stage, but I think I could be a good stage manager. So I went to school to do that. The dean there also had me be her business assistant. So I did all the kind of books for the department. And so when I left school, rather than going into stage management, I immediately got hired by Canadian Stage to be the production manager for the Shakespeare in the Park, the Dream in High Park down in Toronto. A friend of mine at the Stratford Festival, I was up for the job of being production manager for the main theater there. He said, Tim, you're going to get bored here. I don't mean this in a negative way, but you should open up a producing house and just do that full time. And I took that advice, and it's fortunately been a very successful choice. So I really like it. I've ended up being able to take Canadian work to 42 countries, every state, every province, every state of Australia. This year will pass 800 productions that I've been involved with or produced. So I'm excited about it.
Wow.
That's incredible.
42 years in the business. So there we go.
Nice.
Wow. We're very fortunate to have you here at the Shaw Festival and part of this vision of this capital campaign, which is what I wanted to talk to you about today and hear about so that our listeners on their way to the Shaw Festival know that there's much more going on behind the scenes. I wanted to start with a moment I remember very clearly. We were at an opening. We were at the Royal George, and you were doing the introduction and thanking all of our sponsors and supporters. And you said something along the lines of theater being a movement. When you said that, what was it that you were trying to convey to the audience at the time?
So theater is a movement, particularly the charitable theater movement is a particular part of that. In initially the 1940s in the United States, but then in Canada and around the world, in Britain, there was a sudden movement away from what I would call the Broadway model, which is a very commercial model. But in the 40s in the States, there was a sudden movement toward the idea that there were things about art that were good for us. So there were movements across the United States to develop art spaces for their communities where the kind of basic human needs served by art and maybe best delivered by art were finding a home. In the late 50s and early 60s, that happened with Stratford Festival and the Shaw Festival and here in Canada. We were kind of the earliest of those charitable movement theaters. Around that same time, also, the large charitable theaters of the UK showed up. It's actually interesting seeing Laurence Olivier accept the Regional Tony Award at one point for the National Theatre in Britain because he talks about this sort of movement of a charitable theatre. But the guy who started talking about that first was George Bernard Shaw. He was the first person to call for a charitable civic theatre movement. And so I've always thought, in a weird way, this is the home of that thought process. And we fit in. We're not in competition with any of the other theater companies in the country. The only real competition we have is the couch. You need to get up and get out and do things. Our movement is about bringing people together, sharing stories, walking in other people's shoes through our art, but also around provoking conversations with difficult subjects. Those are the things I think live art does very, very well, and our particular type of live art does extremely well.
And so how does that connect to this capital campaign? Can you tell us about it and what some of those goals and dreams are?
Absolutely. So we're calling the campaign All Together Now. It's Shaw's campaign for real human connection and how we can help lead a movement for real human connection through live art. Now, we need physical assets to do that. Rebuilding the Royal George has been something we need to do anyway. It's falling down. It literally is dissolving because it was built as a temporary building out of clay. And so the largest part of the financial side of it is we need to rebuild that building and build it homaging a 19th century theater like we have, but for 21st century audiences and in fact 22nd century audiences. This building's going to be around long after all of us, and really it will be serving audiences into the 2100s and hopefully beyond that if we build it right. So we've got to think about what those audiences need 100 years from now. The other large capital project is the Shaw Artist Village. And so we're really thinking about the 5 buildings of what used to be the Upper Canada Lodge being converted into seasonal artist apartments, into spaces for visiting students to come and stay, university students or high school students to come and stay and work with us longer periods. Also shorter term artists, designers, playwrights, people coming down here for a period of time, a little like the Banff Center does. We want a smaller version of that. And then our 4 wardrobe shops are all moving under one roof, which is a huge thing because they're our largest labor unit.
Wow.
There's about 60 something people in wardrobe. They make about 5,000 costume pieces a year. So, it's a huge amount of work, and they're scattered all over the town, but we're going to get them all under one roof so they're more efficiently working together. They can see each other, talk to each other, hand things off rather than trying to carry them across town. And then finally, the central building, which is called the Burton Center for Lifelong Creativity, will be a lab space, really focusing on 2 very specific areas: how it can reduce social isolation and increase cognitive, physical, and social maintenance among seniors. It's an area where I think is maybe the largest impact we can have. And then also how we can more deeply engage with students. We're not necessarily looking for all of those people to become actors or technicians, but all of the skills that you learn in theater are useful to you in your daily life. So we want to make sure that they love theater, but also that they learn from theater and learn how to stand up and look people in the eyes. And what you, Alexis, often call whole body communication, I think is really what we're aiming for.
And if someone wants to support the Shaw Festival, the capital campaign is now public. There's opportunities for people to contribute and support this vision. How could they find a way to connect with the Shaw Festival if they wanted to do that?
Yes, if they went onto shawfest.com, there's a slider that talks about All Together Now, and obviously lots more information about the campaign, lots more images and descriptions of the buildings, some very nice videos that have been put together by, actually Kelly here and Zach did a great job of putting together some videos describing what the campaign's all about. And I think that really what's exciting about it is people's ability to get involved, both practical in that they can take classes or do things that are part of this deepening of connection. If they want to get involved in terms of adding money into it, we'd love that. We are trying to raise a total of $150 million beyond our regular budget. This is an enormous undertaking, and we've already raised more than 110. So we're in good shape. We're making good progress. I'm working with the federal government to figure out how their investment into the Royal George rebuild will occur, but we still got to raise $20 million. And I know that sounds like not very much, but actually it's that last stretch. We've really got to get through that last stretch now and make sure that we do it well.
Every little bit counts.
Every little bit counts. And it's amazing how people are coming to the table that way, both with pledges in the current moment, but also with legacy gifts. People are thinking about us in their wills, which is often how people who don't have huge amounts of wealth can help the organizations they care about later, so that they leave something in the estate, which of course doesn't really take away from them, but it helps the organization in perpetuity.
This has been a really exciting conversation, Tim. I really appreciate you coming in and telling us more about this bigger vision and this real opportunity, as you say, to create this movement to be part of a bigger picture in terms of our connectivity through the arts.
Thank you. It's been great to be here.
Thanks, Tim. So, Spike, on today's episode, we're going to be talking with Tim Carroll and Will Eno.
Yes, we are.
You may remember Will's play Middletown, which ran here at the Shaw Festival and then transferred to Crow's Theatre in Toronto. He won a Drama Desk Award for The Realistic Joneses, starring Toni Collette, Michael C. Hall, and Marissa Tomei, and his new play, Wakey Wakey, opened at the Signature Theatre in New York, where he is a Residency Five Fellow.
Tim Carroll is the artistic director of the Shaw Festival and director of Gnit. A couple of selected credits from his time here at the Shaw Festival include last season's My Fair Lady and The Importance of Being Earnest. He also was the director of the award-winning production of Twelfth Night and Richard III, starring Mark Rylance, and most recently, Othello at the Royal Shakespeare Company. And so, Kelly, I think it's a good time for us to talk to TC about why he programmed Gnit by Will Eno.
Let's hear what he had to say.
Gnit is the alternative name for the character who was originally Ibsen's Peer Gynt, and he's now Peter Gnit, which, in fact, as he himself says in the play, is just a typo that they decided to stick with. It's silly, but it's also very profound because it is a response. It's Will's response to Peer Gynt, by which I don't mean that you have to know Peer Gynt to enjoy this play, but what you will find is that behind the play Gnit lies the idea that animates Ibsen's Peer Gynt, which is that somehow the most important thing you can do in life is to go in quest of your own self-actualization. When we did Middletown in 2017, it was a really huge success. I think without doubt the success of the season. I've always wanted to direct one of his plays myself, and as an artistic director, you often have to give away your favorites to other people, which is fine, but actually in this case I really just thought, no, I want to do Gnit. I love Will's writing. I love the strangeness of it, and I think our audience suits Will's writing because I think we really have an audience that loves words, that loves the surprising construction of sentences. Of course they must love that because they love Bernard Shaw, and while Will is nothing like Bernard Shaw, I think the sensual pleasure of extraordinary writing is shot through all his plays, and Gnit is no exception.
How did you come to writing plays?
As with a lot of people and a lot of things, that there wasn't a very crystalline moment where suddenly it was an aha kind of thing. Strangely, it was reading something and not seeing something, but it was a very, very short Don DeLillo play called The Athlete in Rapture is Assumed into Heaven. And it's just one page long, and all it is it's this one character is in all tennis white clothing, and they have a racket. They just won a match, and there's a reporter with a microphone coming around just circling them with this very, very long one-sentence question, which is like, what must it feel like after all the years of using a racket that smelled like someone else and all the blah, blah, blah. And I was really amazed at what could be accomplished with people, lights, and words. So that was an early moment of being really excited at the possibilities of the thing. I had always done freelance stuff, raking leaves or painting houses or anything like that. And I refinished some guy's floors, and he said, oh, I'm always looking for people. And so I got this kind of brutal job, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, making cold calls to send people information. In some ways, my first writing that I liked was from around that time, because I used to just come home too exhausted to make anything up, I guess. I'm too exhausted to...
like spiritually as well, not just...
A little bit.
Yeah, not just the exhaustion of long day, but actually just all of the voices that would be in your ears or hanging up on you.
Exactly, yeah. And so it wasn't like life force. It was just a little glowing ember of something that just sort of came out. It was like too exhausted to put up a front, kind of. And so that's how you become a writer.
Just the descent into humanity.
Yeah.
That's great. TC, how did theater find you?
Theatre found me not as late, but in as sidewise a fashion as it did Will. I didn't grow up as a theatre brat or wanting to be an actor. I went to university to do Greek and Latin and just got obsessed with Shakespeare specifically and with verse. and became very technically intrigued by iambic pentameter and how you speak it and its relationship to the meaning of the words. So even when I did my thesis for my master's degree, which was in ancient Greek drama, I did a comparative study of line endings in Shakespeare and Sophocles. So I only started in theatre to try out theories on how you speak verse.
When did directing come into your world?
Well, I did act in some plays in my first year at Oxford, and then at the end of that year, I'd been in 3 plays. I probably should have spotted the hint from the fact that I hadn't been cast in any big parts, and my friends staged an intervention and said, "You've got to stop."
No.
Yeah, they did. They sat me down and said, "You're a really horrible actor. You should stop." But of course, the trouble is, you've only got 4 years at university, and I'd spent the first of them trying to act. And I realized they were right. I mean, I sort of looked back and went, oh yeah, that's right. Because I'd never believed a single word I said on stage. But by then, all my mates were in the theatre world. All the best looking girls were in the theatre world. So I was going to die a friendless virgin if I couldn't stay in that circle. So I did what I think many failed actors in history have done, which is become a director.
Wow. How did you two meet? So TC, you programmed Middletown back in 2017, but did you know Will's work before then? Had you crossed paths before?
No, and we didn't even meet till after Middletown had been on, because I was away when Will came up to see Middletown. So we didn't actually meet until the year or two later when I was in New York. But I had just found Middletown on the shelves in the National Theatre bookshop in London and started reading it standing there, and just read one page and went and bought it. I thought, this is a voice I need to know more about.
You know, I like that bookshop a lot, and I just was over in London for the first time in a few years, and it I don't know, I think of those moments where I pulled something off the shelf that I didn't know anything about, and that's such a nice sort of quiet but deep connection that you make with something, you know, just pull it off the shelf.
And what was that first meeting like, Will? What was it like to meet TC?
I don't know, do you have memories of specific, Tim?
We had been corresponding over Middletown, and especially over Will's trip up, during which he had, I think, very bad food poisoning. And so I had been worried about that, and we talked about that. And then I said, I'm coming to New York to see Thom Pain, which was fantastic. And we met in the bar below the theatre for a bite before it.
A lot of your work and the plays that you write are really investigating a lot of this hyper-reality, which feels like it's actually what we're living right now, you know, in a lot of ways. What was the inspiration for you to look at Peer Gynt with this lens?
Sort of a similar meandering and unsatisfying story as how I became a writer a little bit. But I also have to say, just, Tim, I do remember there was a lot of correspondence as Middletown was approaching, and that was just a great experience. It was kind of a surprise that Middletown was going to be happening at the Shaw Festival, and it felt so... It's a thing I love about working in London, that it was entirely part of the DNA at the Shaw Festival. There's a dead seriousness without any preciousness. And I love that. And in talking with Tim about directors and design and this and that and all that stuff in the ensemble and everything like that was just a really lovely thing. And I'd forgotten about the food poisoning, but in fact, it's a kind of glowing memory, because I
Worst way?
Yes, all good, actually. I had to go out and be unwell out in the driveway of where we were staying.
Oh my gosh.
But I saw a shooting star while I was out there. So it was sort of an amazing moment of like, oh, there you go. I don't know if the universe had to do this to get me to see that, but I think I felt so fragile at some event that was going on the next day. And I said something like, probably I should just be having a ginger ale and sitting down right now, but it's lovely to be here, or something like that. And one of the millions of really, really wonderful people either in or around the Shaw Festival appeared with a ginger ale not too long after that. And I'm just so excited to come back. And my daughter, Albertine, was just 3 when we were there the last time. And I have such deep, full feelings for the whole place. Sorry. Gnit, it got under my skin in both good and bad ways. There's something frustrating about it, because it doesn't quite seem like a play when you read it there. And I certainly admire the ambition and the craziness and the fantastical nature of the whole thing. It very much was this character of Solveig, who I always felt bad for the person playing that character and the character, that they kind of were sort of sitting backstage for 30 years or a couple acts just to come out and say, I forgive you, you've been alive in my heart this whole time. And so I was seeking justice for Solveig in a crazy way, if that doesn't seem too interventionist.
No, not at all. And that was one of the things, and we've just started some previews here, and a lot of that feedback from the audience was how true it follows Peer Gynt's story, his adventure. It really kind of, you hit on all those marks along the way, and that the arrival of the resolution of Solveig's story, which maybe we won't give quite away in this podcast because we just want people to come and see it and experience it. But there is something about that decision and the way that her story concludes or is satisfied in a lot of ways at the end of this particular telling of this, that was really striking. And the other thing, we've talked about this a lot in rehearsals, and I remember reading when I first read the play to come on board to do the movement for it, was how incredibly close to how my son and I speak, especially when he was 16 a couple of years ago, how much that first scene between Peter and his mom, I swear to God, we've had exchanges that are exactly those words. It was so true in some of those moments that I realized, and there's moments along the way that, TC and I are quoting all the time now. They've just become part of our everyday. But TC, what was it in reading when you got Gnit? Were you sort of thinking about this and programming this? What was it that captured you with that piece?
Well, it was actually a bit of a slow burn, because the first time I read Gnit, someone had suggested we do a reading of it, a public reading. And this was back in the Middletown year, I think, or the year after. And I read it, and I could immediately see that there were sort of terrific theatrical possibilities, like the town being played by one actor and so on. I could see that those were going to be delightful, and so I gave the go-ahead for the reading to happen. But I didn't find myself as moved by it as I had been by Middletown initially. But then I came back to it a few years later, and I remember vividly reading it one night just on my couch with almost no lights in the house, and it really got under my skin. And an interesting thing about Will as a kind of sportsman turned writer is he has a really unprecious way of talking about improving a script. And I wrote to Will and said, I've just read Gnit again and I got it a lot more this time. I think we might want to do it. And Will's response was, if you think you might want to do it, let me have another pass at it, because I think I can improve it 15%.
It ended up being 17, I think, right, Tim? You had said I hit just under...
Yeah, Will's right. It was 17% in the end, because he did send it back, and I did find myself going, oh yeah, the 15% better that I could have sort of imagined is there, but there's a little bit at the end which is an extra 2%, which is actually vital, and changed it even more for me. I'd already decided I wanted to do it, but that made me go, okay, this is a very profound play. I think it's unfair to say that it's more profound than Peer Gynt, but I think it is in a way, because I think it's more honest. I think what Will is talking about in terms of holding Peter to account a bit more and making some of the dishonest sleights of hand that Ibsen tries to get away with, kind of pulling the veil away and showing those and saying, actually, no, just telling your mum a fairy story about a sleigh ride up to heaven as she dies doesn't make it okay that you abandoned her. That sort of thing. It makes the experience of the play more, I think, much more moving. And I speak as someone who has directed Peer Gynt with Mark Rylance in the role. So I really resonated with what Will said about productions of Peer Gynt always seem to be trying to solve it. Either solve it or at least throw enough bells and whistles in that the audience won't notice where the weak points are.
It was something else to be in rehearsal for Gnit and TC to go, oh, I need to ask Will that question. And literally just on break would go, email. And you would be responding within that same 15-minute coffee break. What's that like for both of you to have that kind of creative collaboration? I mean, really, this is an amazing exchange. And I will say with a living playwright, because we here at the Shaw Festival, we do a lot of classics. We do a lot of material that is outside of really modern plays and the time and everything like that. So what's that like to be able to literally just message each other and go, can I ask this question? And, oh, yeah, good. Let me think about that.
It's great for me. And I think trusting someone and liking someone is a huge thing, and just assuming that everyone is going to do this thing with as full a heart as they can muster and all that is it's just a really nice feeling. And it's partly a function, I suppose, of just being older and having been a dad for 10 and a half years now. And I'm so excited to get up there to Niagara-on-the-Lake, mainly to have ice cream and to maybe sit on this log that my daughter and I sat on and skipped stones into the lake a long time ago. And of course, see the play and of course, talk with Tim and all that sort of stuff. But it's just, I really, really am aware of the beauties of being a playwright. And they're not because you can buy a boat.
Right, not quite. Wait, no, come on. Your Netflix is coming. I feel it.
Yeah. So that's a long answer to how great it is to be in conversation with Tim about this play or anything.
I feel incredibly honored, really, to be able to send an email to a really significant major modern playwright, which you are, Will, whether or not you would enjoy hearing any of those adjectives. But I think I'm not particularly the kind of director who, when working with a writer, is forever saying, can we rewrite this? Can you change that? What's that line about? Can you explain this or that? I think because I've worked so much with Shakespeare and now with Shaw, I prefer just to say, look, you wrote it, we'll say it. And we may or may not totally understand it, but I sort of feel like I don't want to cheat by saying what's going on there. I prefer the knowledge that, Will can watch a little bit of it and go, you've totally misunderstood that line. And at that point, of course, you can go, oh, yeah, we have, haven't we? Okay, good, thanks. But on the whole, I've always surprised the writers I've worked with who always, and Will didn't do this, but writers have often turned up into my rehearsal rooms slightly with their fists up, ready to defend their play, and then found themselves surprised when I say, no, I don't want to change a word. I just want to do the play you've written. By the same token, I don't object if a writer is in the room and says, I've got some better ideas. I know Tom Stoppard was very famous for doing that. And no doubt each change he made, or at least most of them, were for the better. But I'm not too bothered about that either way. I just, you've written the play. It's our job to put it on. In the same way that and this is a bit heretical, I don't know what you'll think of this, Will. I'm not mad keen on workshops of plays. I just think the best plays are written by a writer at a desk and then put on by a team of talented people. And I've seen too many plays go through this workshop process where everyone in the room has their opinion. I don't like this sort of pseudo-democracy of workshops where every stupid opinion is thrown at the author and they're supposed to change something on the strength of it. I think the author knew what they were trying to write, and our job is to put it on if we like the play. And if you don't like the play, then don't put it on.
I also was thinking that's a wonderful person to work with, that someone who just says, okay, let's figure this thing out. But I also do remember, I don't remember the lines in particular, but you had preferences because there's few versions around. And I remember you saying, hey, I miss so-and-so this line, something like that. So that also made me feel very trusting that they had both their sort of considered approach and then a kind of gut approach.
Do you remember what that was, TC?
It was literally just one adjective that had changed from the earlier draft into the most recent. And it was the only change where I thought, I think I preferred it before. And I just said, is it all right if we go back to the original? I think it was we're an angry mob, and I think it had changed to we're a crazy mob, and I just preferred angry. And Will said, sure.
Is there something, Will, that in the story of Peter, Gnit, that we should keep an eye out for? Or is there something about the story? If I didn't know Peer Gynt, What is it about Peter Gnit, or something that we could take away from watching this play?
I feel torn between wanting to just be allowing and open to people's responses and interpretations, and not wanting to seem completely smug and self-satisfied with my play. I certainly do not mean this to be a smarty-pants academic exercise in the dramaturgy of Henrik Ibsen's Peer Gynt. So I can say I don't think you need to know anything about the original. I think the production is going to be really clear and helpful and both real and grounded. So it's not going to be an over-explained hand-holding thing, but I also think it's just going to be very present and true. So I think I can promise 3 fewer hours than the original. So
yes,
you
very
have
good.
that.
Right.
Please enjoy those on my behalf.
That's very good. And TC, what about you?
You certainly don't need to know Peer Gynt, but I think there are lots of moments where if you are puzzled as to why we seem to have 3 consecutive encounters with a young woman in the mountains when one would have done perfectly well, you will probably spot at some point, oh, that is because we're tracking Peer Gynt quite faithfully, and it is not quite making the editorial point that the structure of the original is wonky, but I would almost say forcing the original to accept the consequences of its own wonkiness. And there are moments when Will brings that out more and more explicitly than others. When the robber finds a picture in the briefcase he's just stolen and says to us very pointlessly, I might as well describe the whole thing. That already gets a good laugh from the audience because they can see that that is effectively Will saying, God knows why Ibsen thinks that a character would just stop and talk out loud about the picture he's looking at. So there are moments like that which are a bit meta, but they don't rely on knowledge of the original. You actually can extrapolate what is wrong with the original from the criticism.
You are both athletes, yes? Will, you did a lot of cycling, is that right?
Correct, yes. It was from about the age of 12 to about 23, and I got out of high school early, and I lived at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, and I was so I really did it at a very high level for a pretty long time. I had a Romanian coach named Constantine Negulescu, and he was very much in the Eastern European mold of this is what you do, and this is how hard you work, and all that sort of stuff. So then I studied writing long after school with a guy named Gordon Lish, who had a similarly Eastern European approach in a way, which was just, this is really hard and no one asked you to do it. So those are
getting on the bicycle
complain
again.
if you want. But so that I think I just have that in my sense of things, that it's a lot of hard work, and that if you don't somehow enjoy or find ways to enjoy the hardness of it, it's going to be hard.
But it's interesting how, again, this connection between the kind of training, the mindset that you go into when you're working at that top level. And I know, TC, you bring that into a lot of the work that you do here, especially within the classes and the way that you run rehearsals. And so there is this connection in a way between what we're doing as athletes in our art practice, and that it's not easy. You can't just sort of jump on that bike, and sure, you can go for a nice ride, but to really think of going to those next levels and to take on that work that's involved, that commitment of training in a way. Is there anything that either of you are working on now that you use that idea as you're going forward? Is there anything or is there a way that keeps kind of trucking along for either of you?
You just made me think that I was thinking back of the idea of being serious without being precious. And in some ways, that's a few word definition of doing sports, that it's always games at some level, and it's really serious stuff. And so there's definitely things I'm working on now where I wish I could even more sort of incorporate the thrill of the game part of it, because you can lose it a bit,
Yeah, there's an exhaustion, that can come with that kind of pushing yourself and that drive. And TC, I'm wondering, is there anything that you've got sort of in that you draw back to those resources and that kind of mindset, that working that you're looking forward to, or there's things that you're using those tools for now?
Well, I've always wished theatre could be as exciting as sport. And every now and again it is. I've tried in various ways across my career to achieve that by doing a lot of improvised shows and a lot of shows in unusual or even unprepared environments where the audience gets to see the actors solve the problem in real time. The very first time, for example, I did a Hamlet in Hungary where I brought my English company across to play it with them, and the actors didn't meet each other until the show started, and half of them played in Hungarian and half of them played in English. And so having moments like that created something like that feeling of a sporting event where you think, wow, this could all go completely wrong. We really don't know who's going to win. So on the one hand, philosophically, I've always worked that way, but I think it's also the discipline of saying, we've got to come to class, we've got to keep our skills sharp. I love teaching Shakespeare verse, for example. I teach it at the Shore, even though we don't do Shakespeare usually, because I love it in the same way that I think a sportsman loves spring training. You just get back and remind yourself of all those basic skills and do them over and over again till you can do them in your sleep. Because I love what Will said, nobody asked us to do this. And, as Bernard Shaw says, if you insist on showing people your baby, you have to accept it if they say it's ugly. So we have to do something to justify the fact that we're asking people to pay money to watch us. We can't just say, well, we're artists, we deserve a living wage. What does that mean? We actually have to be at a level in the same way that soccer players and sportsmen have to be at a level where people will pay money to watch them do it. And, we all know from my level of sport that I achieved as a decent amateur footballer, I know that the gulf between me and even the worst professional footballer is enormous and unbridgeable because they have put so much more work in. And J.M. Barrie said that writing a play is the hardest thing you can do with a pen in your hand. That's the discipline that Will has had to subject himself to. It's not just the discipline of sitting down and waiting for inspiration to strike. It's the discipline of writing terrible stuff and having to throw it away, and writing good stuff and having it rejected. All of that resilience that you need in a life in the theatre, it takes practice. It doesn't come naturally.
So if someone was coming down, they're going to come and see the play. Will, is there something that they could listen for? Is there something that you would suggest, a little Easter egg or something that people could keep their ear out for as they come to see this show?
It's for totally different reasons than I connected to the scene with the mom and Peter when she's dying. Well, here's a fun way to do it. Do you guys do an intermission or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And does it come right after that scene?
Yes.
So you should know in the scene about halfway through the play where Peter is with his dying mom, you're just about to have intermission, so you can go to the bathroom, you can get a drink, and so you should feel very, very alive. You should feel. I think beautiful things happen there. The mom is not like my mom, but she kind of is in a way, and she had a very different death. But my mom died at 91 after a big long life of a lot of friends and kayaking and crazy stuff, and she had dementia, but she was at home and we were all there. And it wasn't frightening dementia. It was a little bit telling the same story and asking the same question. It was, she really just wanted to talk. We were talking about some kind of bird and I was saying, I'm 55. And she said, are you? And normally she would have kind of come up with a front to say, I know how old you are, but it was just this kind of childlike amazement. Well, mom, my son is 55 years old. And so anyway, I hope that's a meaningful scene for people, both for themselves and also as a sort of propellant for the second half of the players to help us understand the journey that Peter goes on from that scene.
TC?
I love that scene. I also love the sense of wonder in the play. I don't want to refer to a specific moment, but just notice all the times that the line could be about something local, but becomes something cosmic instead. That you could say, okay, I'm going to give you one line. You could say it's been a long day in this bar, and instead the line is, it's been a long day on this earth. And I just think that's a theme that runs through the play, the sudden zooming out of the lens to remind us that we're all on the little blue dot.
That's beautiful. I want to thank you both for coming in and talking with us today about Gnit, about this wonderful relationship that you have together. And we are very excited, Will, that you are going to be coming up here to see us for opening. We're thrilled.
Well, I'm really, really excited to come, and I'm excited. Albertine's really excited. So yeah, thank you guys for everything, and thanks, Tim, for programming the play and seeing it how you see it and all that stuff.
Thank you for writing it.
Gnit is playing until October 4th. Tickets available at shawfest.com.
Thank you to Will Eno and Tim Carroll for joining us, and also our special guest, Tim Jennings. And thank you, as always, for listening. If you have any questions, thoughts, or just want to say hello, drop us a line at podcast@shawfest.com.
Let's Get This Shaw on the Road is hosted by Alexis Milligan and produced by me, Kelly Wong. Original music by Travis Cito. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to us right now.
Next week, we are joined by Shari Flett and Taryn Kim. We'll chat about collective creations, what it's like to learn 8 dances, and how difficult and also easy it is to ask someone to dance. With May I Have the Pleasure.
We'll see you then.
Let's get this Shaw on the road.